So there was a question about how to do 5.2 part 1 number 20, and I thought I would just do it this way so that you can see the whole process. Now, as part of this exercise, we know that the syllogism is in standard form. And to save time, one thing that I did is I already drew out these circles. It took me a little bit of time to get this Venn diagram together, and I'm sure you didn't want to spend your valuable time watching me fumble around with those. So now what I need to do is label the Venn diagram. So on the left-hand side here, we've got the minor term, which is the subject of the conclusion, and so that's six-pointed crystals. All right? And again, it doesn't matter what you call it, but for our purposes, I'm going to call this S. Okay? So that's the minor term. The major term, which is the predicate of the conclusion, is uniform solids. So we're going to call that U. The middle term is snowflakes. Now we used S, so we can't use S again, so let's make snowflakes F for flakes. Okay, again, it doesn't matter what letters we use, but generally, obviously, we try to use letters that are representative of what we're talking about. So we've got S, U, and F. All right, now, the first premise is some snowflakes are not uniform solids. Okay, some snowflakes are not uniform solids. Because that's a particular premise, we're going to skip that and we're going to go to hopefully now a universal one. So let's see. The next one is all, oh sorry, that was my Outlook. I hope this doesn't happen again. Now we're going to go to all snowflakes are six-pointed crystals. Okay, so it's going to be all F are S. Now again, for all R, we're going to shade the Pac-Man for the F that's trying to eat the S. And we want to make sure we shade the entire Pac-Man. So let's see. I think I'm going to use the pen here. See if it works. Okay. The shading is not going to be perfect, but nonetheless it will be shading. Okay. How does that look? It looks horrible, doesn't it? But you get the idea. Okay, make sure we get his chin. Sometimes people forget that part. And okay, that's all FRS. Now, we go back to the first premise, which is that some snowflakes are not uniform solids. So some F are not U, and so we're going to put an X in the Pac-Man for the F that's trying to eat the U. Now, here's where we get to the question. Half of this Pac-Man is already full. So where do we put the X? If there's nothing in the Pac-Man at all, we would put the X on the line. All right? But since half the Pac-Man is shading, we're going to put the X on the part of the Pac-Man that's not shaded. So I'm just going to take my pen here, and I'm going to put the X right there. Okay? Now I'm done with my Venn diagram. Okay, so let's look at this. The conclusion is some six-pointed crystals are not uniform solids. Okay? So for this to be valid, we would expect there to be an X inside the Pac-Man for the S that's trying to eat the U. And if we look inside this Pac-Man, let's try our creative pen. I'm wondering if that's gonna, wow, look at that. So we look inside this Pac-Man here, and we see that there is an X, okay? And since there is an X inside that Pac-Man, we know that the syllogism is valid. But just to check, we are going to figure out the Moodin figure. All right? And so this is O, some are not, and then we've got all R, which is A, and then we've got some are not, which is O, and then the figure is determined by the position of the middle term, which is it's the subject for both, and so that's figure 3. OAO3 is what our syllogism is. Now we're going to take this box and we're going to move it up so it's out of the way. So we know this is an OAO3, and then we look at the chart in the beginning of our book and we look under figure 3 and we see OAO so that we know that it's valid. And I know what you're saying. What about the 6 rules? Okay, actually there's only 5 rules. So we'll do that too. Okay, we have a particular conclusion and a particular premise, so rule number 5 is not violated. We have a negative conclusion and but also a negative premise, so we're okay with rule number 4. Okay, O's are negative. But we also have one affirmative premise, so we're okay at rule number 3. Okay, now we get to the distribution. Okay, looking at the conclusion, and I always forget 2 and 1, but we know that the middle term has to be distributed at least once, and if we look at all snowflakes are 6-pointed crystals, the subject is distributed there, snowflakes is the middle term, and so the middle term is distributed at least once. And then in the conclusion, the predicate, uniform solids, is distributed, and it's also distributed in the first premise. So everything distributed in the conclusion is distributed in the premise, and so it violates none of our rules. And so we used mood and figure and the rules to check our answers so that we know that at least the results that we got from our Venn diagram is correct. And that, in a nutshell, a very large nutshell, is how we do 5.2 Part 1, number 20. Please let me know if you have any other questions, and these are not particularly difficult to do, so I'll be glad to do as many of these demonstrations as you need. Bye for now.